I was able to find something I felt incredibly passionate about, but I was also able to use all of the skills that I had been academically trained for and that I experienced in the business world. There is no better way to do that.
Welcome back to What We Leave Behind, a podcast produced by the Hale Foundation, where we sit down with leaders throughout the South Florida community who are having a major impact. Today, I'm sitting down with David Landsberg, the president and CEO of Goodwill South Florida. Thank you so much for being here today, David. I am so excited to have you on here today.
Thank you for having me.
So today we're going to start off just talking a little bit about your history. So previously, you were the president and publisher of the Miami Herald, correct?
I was.
What inspired the transition from the media industry to leading a nonprofit like Goodwill Industries of South Florida? What inspired you to?
Well, it really happened kind of by accident. So I had spent a number of years on the board of Goodwill South Florida as a volunteer board member. And I grew to love that organization. I thought maybe I'd stay on the board for 4 years or so. And it's the kind of place where you can never really leave. And so I stayed on the board for 20 years. And when I was ready to transition out of media after 30 years, it just happened that the CEO of Goodwill South Florida was retiring. And the board asked, well, why wouldn't you want to come do this?
So what was your experience like working with Goodwill prior to obtaining such a large role?
So that was really interesting as well, because the Miami Herald was looking to replace in the newspaper industry what's called a mail room. And that's where we put the inserts in the newspaper. And we had kind of run out of space. And before we bought new equipment, we took a look around quickly to see if anybody else could do that for us. And Goodwill raised their hand and said, this is a real opportunity to employ people with disabilities on a Miami Herald project. And we looked into it and decided to do it. And so for 23 years, the Miami Herald employed 250 people with disabilities at Goodwill. And although you didn't know it when you were receiving the Thursday and Sunday paper, those inserts were put in there by people challenged with disabilities and other barriers to work.
Me and another intern here had the opportunity to be able to visit the location in Miami, and it really was just such an incredible experience to be able to see the process firsthand and truly how much it is impacting these people's lives. They truly looked happy and fulfilled, and just what an incredible way to give them a sense of purpose.
It's a pretty incredible operation. You know, undoubtedly when people come visit and stand in the lobby ready to walk out, they say one thing, and it's, I had no idea. Because people understand that we're the place to donate this jacket when I'm done with it, and that we have stores. But beyond that, they're not really sure what we're doing. But the truth is, those are really funding mechanisms for the nonprofit, which is all about workforce development, particularly for people with disabilities and barriers.
It's beyond incredible, beyond incredible. And so you served, I'm going to go back to, you served on Goodwill's board for nearly 2 decades before becoming CEO in March of 2014. How did that experience shape your vision for the organization stepping into CEO and president?
So it's interesting, the two roles are entirely different. So as a board member, as a volunteer, you're very focused on the governance of the organization. It's a nonprofit, so you want to make sure that everything they're doing is really letter of the law and focused, and it always has been. But you're also somewhat focused on the strategy of the place. I'd say those are the two things that the board really engages in. So as a board member, I had a really great focus on the strategy of the organization. And to me, it was fascinating. So here's a guy you get out of private industry. I'm used to running large organizations, and the way this nonprofit executes is very unique. So essentially, what we had to do over the years is start creating our own businesses and operating in those sectors in order to employ more people with disabilities and barriers, because left only up to private industry, as you can imagine, we had quite a problem making a dent in the need in South Florida. And so we took it upon ourselves, and we've done that probably for the last 35 years. And we've had a lot of success growing those social enterprises. And the reason it's called a social enterprise is because ultimately, those businesses are profit positive. But for a nonprofit, it's not really profit, it's investment that goes back into recruiting, training, and preparing people for the workforce. So the golden part of it is if you're able to cash flow, any cash you make on those businesses can actually fund the nonprofit organization. And so for me, coming out of private industry, I was able to find something I felt incredibly passionate about, but I was also able to use all of the skills that I had been academically trained for and that I experienced in the business world. And there is no better way to do that. I look back on the last 11 years, and obviously I feel like it was an incredible second career, but I feel like the board was specifically looking for somebody like me who could be a business operator really, but also had a tremendous passion for the mission.
It's incredible. And I think, like you said, having that passion behind the qualifications really sets you apart from a lot of leaders. Goodwill employs the largest disabled workforce in Florida. How do you maintain such an inclusive and supportive work environment?
Well, we've got a long list of impressive stats. There's probably none more impressive than having a third of our workforce with a federal level disability. It just doesn't exist anywhere in our state, and really we're one of the largest in the Southeast. So we have that 1,000 is absolutely a group of people that have not had an easy time finding work or have never had work. Many are coming from their family's couch, maybe having graduated Dade County Public Schools, and that was the family's milestone and something they were very proud of. It is a point to be proud of. But we run across many families that have no idea that someone with that level of disability can really be functional and contribute in the workforce. And so we're all about that. The minute somebody walks in and sees others like them and can feel the nurturing kind of organization, they realize that this is the kind of place where they could be. And parents and guardians have to feel that way too, because your job one is protecting your relative or someone you're caring for. But they get that idea when they walk in, and clearly there are a lot of other people working there and very happy and fulfilled there. And so the story almost always ends up the same. We can take somebody with a significant disability and make them productive at work, and in a way that they're really happy doing that.
It's almost like you've cultivated a home away from home for these people. Like you said, where they're able to socialize and connect with people who they feel inspired by and connected to, but also give them a sense of purpose, because there's not a lot of opportunities for people who do struggle with some tasks that people find simple, Yeah,
I'm glad you actually said it that way, because there are many reasons to want to be in the workforce, but there's none more important than your own self-image and feeling like you can be part of society. In fact, most often when I'm talking with one of our participants, what they say is something like, we just want to be like you. We want to have an opportunity to work and be respected by our coworkers. And at Goodwill, they absolutely are able to do that.
It's amazing. That's so amazing, so amazing. When we took the tour just a few weeks ago, we were able to sit down and listen to a few performances by the Goodwill Band. And even that experience just by itself, these people are beyond talented. Me and Catherine were sitting down and listening to them, and I think I almost broke a tear listening to them, because truly it was just the passion and the energy that you feel in that room and the confidence that is exuding through the music. It's really inspiring. So
for listeners that don't know, one of the things we do at Goodwill is give a group of our folks some time to do what they really, really love to do, which is music. Mm-hmm. Actually, most of the band is on the spectrum with autism, and you wouldn't really necessarily believe that they could be capable at an instrument or incredibly capable at playing together and singing. And if you ever have the chance to see them out, and you do, because they've been invited to South Beach Jazz Festival 3 years in a row, and Goodwill puts on its own concert. at least once a year. And there's an opportunity to see them. I actually have made a strategy out of getting them out more often, because when you have a chance to view people with severe disabilities playing music like that, it has the potential to be life-changing for you, right? You may have never really come in close contact with somebody that's challenged in that way. And when you come away after listening to them, you're thinking all about capabilities rather than disabilities. And it's a reminder every day for those of us that work at Goodwill just how much can be accomplished. So we love having the band. They practice for 2 hours on Wednesday and Thursdays and in the morning, and that's generally when we have tours come through. And they love an audience. So they're in the practice room, but it quickly turns into a mini concert to be able to do what they love, to be able to touch people, really.
It was incredible, and definitely if anybody listening has the chance to be able to attend one of their performances, I promise that you will be touched. It was an amazing experience, and we actually are going to get to meet with them on Thursday.
Oh, great.
So I am super excited. We're going to produce a few smaller pieces interviewing them.
Wonderful.
So we're really excited to start that project.
The thing you'll find out by interviewing them, and again, these are people who have had a lifetime of challenges. They speak from the heart about why they love Goodwill and what it's meant in their life. We put out a couple kind of web commercials over the last few days, particularly for Flag Day, where two of our apparel manufacturers spoke on camera, and they got right to the heart of what the place is about. No script, no nothing, just how they feel. And so another beautiful thing is you often find that people with that level of challenges speak with great honesty. And it's endearing and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sitting down with them and learning more about their story. I truly believe that the environment that you've cultivated through creating this outlet for them is going to touch their lives for the rest of, is going to touch them for the rest of their lives. And I could tell that just by stepping into that room. But to continue on in our conversation, so Goodwill has various entrepreneurial divisions that we just discussed, the apparel manufacturing and third-party logistics being two of them. Could you explain what these divisions are to our listeners?
Yeah, it's not something they would ever imagine until they walk into the place.
I had no idea before I stepped inside.
But it's really an answer that came out of a challenge from 35 years ago. So we were doing well as a nonprofit, but like I mentioned before, having limited capability at placing people in for-profit jobs. And a lot of times, you know, it's a manager that's a hiring manager or a family-owned business. And while they have a heart for it, sometimes they're concerned that they'll have to make special accommodations of some sort. Sometimes they're worried about how their coworkers might react and whether they'll do and be the right thing around this particular coworker. And obviously many do look different and sound different and maybe get beaten out of the job in the interview. And so they have a long history of disconnect in interviews and maybe have derailed from a job or two. And so Goodwill is a place where results are important. That's one thing I'd say, that it's not that Joe just walks in and Joe is disabled and whatever Joe does today is okay. We don't really do that. So everybody has a goal regardless of having a disability, and of course goals are scaled towards what we know they can do, but they're there to achieve that goal every day. And when we were talking earlier about the self-respect you get from work and the feeling of accomplishment, you don't feel like that unless it's a real job. And real jobs have goals and deliverables. And so everybody at Goodwill has a daily challenge that they want to meet. And another thing is it's pretty amazing to watch folks work together and how they work together. In fact, generally when the band is done playing for the day, you will see someone with a neurodiversity come over and grab the lead singer, who's totally blind, by the arm and guide him out into the room.
Wow.
And when I look at that, I realize that what we've really done here is put together a group of people, all who have their own challenges. And generally that group is busy trying to help each other out. And so, and if people stay there for a while, they're becoming a lead operator, or they're becoming a quality control person, or a trainer, or a supervisor. And so later in life, when stabilized in the work environment, we actually have people managing other people with disabilities that are walking in the same condition they were in years ago. And so on one level, we are facilitating people with disabilities helping other people with disabilities.
And I think that's incredible what you mentioned about the lead singer, how they helped guide him. I think that the dynamic that you're describing is that while some of them may be weaker in different ways, they're able to come together and become a strong sort of like factory, aiding each other in their weaknesses and supporting each other in their strengths, which helps them all together.
So let me return to the original question where you asked,
Yeah.
well, how did you get apparel manufacturing? So we actually, the very first business was industrial cleaning. So we started looking for big buildings to clean. We figured it was something we could train to, and it was also something we could easily do job design on. So we don't just take a person and say, show up at a building and tell me that it's clean in the morning, right? It's much more focused. So we go about creating the world's best floor machine operator that we can possibly create. And that person actually enjoys the routine of that job. It's calming for anybody from a whole different range of disabilities, whether they're an emotional disability or neurodiversity or a physical disability. They can really become more and more capable at a narrow job scope. And so we always do that. And then ultimately, as the individual becomes productive, the whole unit becomes productive, the whole company becomes productive, and that's when one of these businesses is actually throwing off some cash flow to go help other people with disabilities. And so we were looking for other businesses. We thought, let's take a look at what the government is actually buying, whether it's a product or a service. And we found military uniforms. The government buys a lot of military uniforms. I wonder if we could make a military uniform. This was 25 years ago. So we get ourselves 6 sewing machines. We take 6 people with disabilities. We get the pattern from the military, who was starved for domestic producers because they have to make military uniforms in the US. And so we raised our hand and said, we can do that. They said, give it a shot. We got started on it. We thought, in fact, we took their easiest product. We took a pair of trousers that only requires 30 steps. How hard could that be? We'll figure it out. And there was a sewing history in Miami. For anybody who's been here long enough, Hialeah was filled with all sorts of apparel factories and shoe factories and such. So there were actually people in the community that could sew and needed help with getting a job. Well, it took us a year and a half to produce a pair of trousers that the Army would accept. And it's a story of perseverance, really, because you want to quit, a bunch of times along the way, but we didn't. And when we got to that skill level, the Army said yes and said, of course, do you want to make more? And we said yes. And then they said, you want to make more? And we said yes. They said, we want to try another product. And so over the last 30 years, 25 years, we've produced at least 25 different products for the military. We're currently producing 12. And that is done with just about 1,000 people in our building in Allapattah. 75% of that team has a federal level disability.
Wow.
And they will produce 1 million units this year. So it's stunning what can be done. Did we know that would happen originally? No. But we stuck to it and were able to grow a very large business. Today, our apparel business is one of the top 10 apparel businesses in the United States.
It's incredible.
Run out of one building focused on people with disabilities. So really, the challenge was absorb more people with disabilities and barriers into the labor force. And if private industry isn't totally playing ball and they're very nervous about it, then we're going to do it ourselves. And so we moved on from commercial cleaning to the apparel business to a laundry business focused on hospitals. So we do the laundry for all Jackson hospitals and for most Baptist hospitals. We're doing sheets, towels, blankets, all of it. It's all very important business because it's bio-controlled. You can't have sheets ever show up with anything detectable, and there never has been, God willing, in the last 11 years. But we've had great success doing that, and we've found those two organizations to really be incredible partners because they do want a good product at the right price. They do want it when they need it. But also, somewhere in the mix, they're very proud of being able to support our mission of employment for people in the workforce that have these challenges. And they've been long-term partners of ours, and they deserve some of our credit, some of our success, because they've stayed the course and supported us for a long time.
Wow, and I know that Goodwill South Florida also aids in producing a large amount of American flags as well. Could you expand upon that for me?
Yeah, so that's really part of the apparel business, because once you learn how to cut and sew, you can pretty much cut and sew anything. And so we got an offer from the Veterans Administration that also dates back about 20 years or more, and said we're looking for more U.S. producers of what's basically the most important flag in the United States. It's the flag that military veterans have presented at their funeral. And so we started like apparel with a small quantity. We became better and better at it. And today we produce about a quarter of the internment flags in the United States, also right out of that building in Allapattah.
And that touched me personally because my great-grandfather served in the military. So when I was walking through there, it was extremely touching.
Yeah,
extremely
the care and love that those flags are made with by people who have their own challenges, and the respect that they have for who they're making that flag for is unbelievable. Each one are handmade. You watch them do it. There isn't a thread loose on a single flag, and they make 500 of those flags a day.
Wow.
So they know the pressure of continuous production, but they don't do it with any less love.
And what an incredible way to give back to your country, too.
It is.
What an incredible way to do that. What role do partnerships play in helping Goodwill reach more people in need?
So I'm really glad you asked that, because it's a real focal point of ours right now. When I came to the organization, we had already achieved some level of greatness. The former CEO was a very entrepreneurial fellow and set up some wonderful businesses for us to employ people with disabilities. But we were very insular. In other words, we did what we did and the way we did it inside of our own walls. And we're focused on being kind of self-sufficient. But we found that we're missing a lot by doing that. And so a couple of years ago, we did a community research study that took a deep dive on other nonprofits in the area, so that we could look for where there might be gaps in service, where we could help fill that gap. We also took a very hard look at the employment landscape in South Florida. And what we found was no mystery, right? We were very dependent on jobs in construction and jobs in hospitality. But we learned where the high volume jobs were. And so what we want to do is enable a strategy that looks very much like 1959 when we started. And it was about placing individuals in jobs out here instead of in here. And so we have been developing strategy over the last couple years to do just that. And one of the places we started is by sitting down and visiting with other nonprofits in the area who, let's say, do some training themselves, have some participants in their programs, but they really would love to find work for them. So developing a skill is one thing, finding work is another thing. And Goodwill has devoted its entire existence for 65 years to the idea that the outcome for us is not training, it's a job. And so we're very skilled at putting people to work. And so, well, I don't want to say the names of the couple other nonprofits yet because we don't really have a signed deal, but let's just say we have major encouragement for Goodwill coming on campus of those other nonprofits and being the workforce development component to how they execute mission. And so we're very sure we're going to be partnering with more than a couple other nonprofits to make our reach wider. And why not? If you're catering to a group of participants in one type of nonprofit, and another type of nonprofit can actually bring a life-sustaining job to the table, why not partner? No one has to do it all themselves. So we're more focused than we've ever been on partnering.
Wow.
You must have found that somehow, because we are.
I'm doing my research.
Okay.
I've been doing my research for sure. So to go along with what you were stating before about how when people tour Goodwill and they are exiting, you stated that they say, I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know that it was like this. To bounce off of that, what are some common misconceptions that Goodwill faces that you'd like to dispel?
Oh, we have a really important one. Because largely people don't understand the rest of the story.
Yes.
And what we really do is that we're a vocational rehab, that we're a place that helps these sectors of our community find work. All they see is the donation part and the store part. Mm-hmm. And so urban legend is that Goodwill is a for-profit because we have stores. And so we can't stand that. It drives us nuts. And we try hard to, refute that and say, just Google it. We're a 501c3. Look at our mission. Look at where the investment of all of this is going. And by the way, I'd like to take a moment to thank your listeners for making donations of gently used clothing and housewares to Goodwill. They may be doing that not even realizing that they are ultimately putting people to work. That's really what they're doing. And they're extremely generous. This year we've had 1.5 million donors to Goodwill, and we've had 4 million shoppers. And so that's what enables us to run 35 stores that bring in $85 million and really go almost halfway to our top line. And it's because of the generosity of South Floridians either donating or shopping. Today we about beg an employer to take one of our graduates. And tomorrow, instead of that, we're going to go to this study that we did, look at the high volume jobs that we have in our community, and specifically train and certify employees for the high volume jobs that employers are having trouble keeping filled. And you could think all forms of construction. And so these labs are going to ultimately each become an academy in Dade and in Broward. And we're in the middle of seeking funding for those, and it's going well. Wow. So I believe that we will hold on to the 3,000 employees we've got, but we're going to find a way to get up and over 1,000 people being placed. We're thinking bold, and we're thinking private industry is the answer. And so I believe it will be.
Wow. And how do you get the word out to these individuals that there is opportunity for them to grow within your company?
It's pretty interesting because for all that we try in the normal channels that you would think of, 50% of the people that come to us are coming by word of mouth.
Wow.
So it is amazing how socially people will say, I'm working at Goodwill. You should see what and all of a sudden there's another person coming. And yes, of course, all the traditional job sites help. All the other nonprofits that we're beginning to partner with much more heavily. So that's a future path of a lot more people coming to us. So imagine for a moment you're one of the homeless organizations and you've triaged somebody that's been on the street, and maybe you even put them in temporary housing. Maybe they're clean from drugs. Maybe they're on meds for a behavioral issue that they've got, and they're work ready. Well, we're going to be a lot more intentional about our social workers getting with their social workers and widening the pipeline of people that are coming to us. So I think there's an awful lot of good that's going to come from partnership with other nonprofits.
Completely. And you've had quite an impressive career so far. Based on the research that I have done on you, what leadership lessons have you pulled from your experience that have guided you in your everyday life? Not only at Goodwill, but in your everyday life?
I think it starts really with finding something you love, finding something you have a passion for, whether it's a social issue or not. I think we're all internally driven by passions that we have, and we really ought to listen to what our own self is telling us, because we end up doing our best work when we're passionate about our work. And work has never really been work for me, because it's been intriguing or perplexing or even confounding sometimes, but it's a driver, right? So I think one of the important lessons is listening to that voice inside of you and doing it. On a more strictly leadership level, I would say my path to success across 2 careers runs through a lot of people. And the skills that I've attained, maybe I've attained great skills academically and in the content I was doing at a job, but there's no greater skills than how you work with people and how you treat people and how clear you are with people and honest. And I think ultimately comes back multifold when you do that. There's no reason to, let's say when you're in a challenging situation, to look at yourself as, a bad guy or challenged by somebody else's challenge. It's the help you offer when they're challenged. And it's at the end of the day that if you know you've provided everything you can possibly do, then you could be good with yourself. And when you do provide everything you can possibly provide, you're creating some of the best developed people around to work around. And I think that has always been a path to success for me. So it's not always about me, it's about them, right? And I think if you go that way and you think about that every day, that there's a return on investment to you ultimately. But my return on investment is the success of people around me and being stimulated by the work that I do. I think those are the 2 most important.
Yeah, I truly believe that the kindness and energy that you put out into the environment around you is reciprocated.
Absolutely.
Is 100% reciprocated.
It's a major psychic return to self if you can do that. And I try and lead that way every day.
Yeah, and that's a testament to your success. So
thank you for that.
Definitely, you're welcome. Definitely is something that I hope to continue to follow.
Oh, you will.
I
can tell by your thoughtful questions that you will.
Thank you. Well, and speaking of that, what advice do you have for the next generation of leaders?
Okay, a couple things. One is the question you asked me just before this about what makes good leadership is a reflection on the past 41 years for me. I think they're just as valid today as they were yesterday. So I think those 2 pieces of advice are what I would tell somebody just coming out. And it's not grandpa's advice, it's real advice that really works today. There's one other thing as a young leader that I did that I think contributed, and that was always listen to your curiosity. Be curious in your work, because when you're curious, you learn about all of the things in front of you, right? Your work may be focused on this, but if you learn about all of this, one day you might be responsible for all of this. And so I think that having a healthy curiosity about all of it around you and what your coworkers doing, and you can only really have a respect for what they're doing if you learn a little bit about what they're doing, right?
Yes.
And you may be helpful. You may think of something that they hadn't thought of. And so I think curiosity is a huge thing. Many times a job will want to paint you into one lane. I'm not a real believer in one lane only. I'm a believer in broadly understanding things. And many times in my career, because I broadly understood something, I got the next opportunity to lead it, even if I was a little fish out of water, right? Mm-hmm. I was convincing enough that I could do it, and I knew enough about it. And I wouldn't do it if I couldn't do it. But I'll raise my hand and say I can do it. And I think that the former mentors of mine would say, this guy would raise his hand not for self-aggrandizement, but because he could contribute something in that area. And I always ended up contributing something in that area. So I think it's great advice for anybody young coming up.
Yes. Yes, and I'm sure that you spoke about curiosity. I'm sure that that stems a little bit from your past in journalism as well,
Oh
too.
yeah, you know, I lived amongst it. I mean, it is. If you ask me what are the key core competencies for anybody that's in journalism, I'd say curiosity is probably right 100%. Up at the top. At least in the type of work we did, it was all about shining light on something that was unknown.
Yes.
And it was a fabulous period of time, and I think it bred some of the DNA inside me in early work years, knowing why we were all there.
Yes, yes, yes. Curiosity. I feel like you can never be too curious. And so to build upon that, how do you stay personally grounded and inspired by the work that you do every single day?
I'm lucky. It's not very hard to stay inspired. You know, running a 6-business operation, there's always something going on. So first of all, the content itself is present every day, every hour of day, every minute of day. So there's not a moment where my mind like strays into Nowhereville because there are so many things to get through. We also have spent the last 2-3 years building an unbelievable team of leaders at Goodwill. And it's a whole nother problem, right? You know, they're a pack of thoroughbreds, you know, up in the gate, blasting through the gate, ready to go, and they've got 4 new things that they want to do. And so the pace that work comes to me at is unbelievable.
Wow.
And so I'm energized every day. But that's not really it. The it is every day I get to walk in that building and see the people that we're helping. And it is like volts entering the electrical system. There is no way you can't get fired up, charged up for serving the people that we're serving. And then you get to see what they accomplish. And that's the real fired up, because they may have walked in kind of astray, not knowing at all what they'll do next in life. And then they get there and able to get themselves in a position where they've got work. And then the day that they really are humming and achieving that comes, and you know it's coming every time, just makes you feel as proud and connected and worthwhile and humble as anything could. If they can do what they do with their challenges in life, I don't really have anything to complain about ever. And I think a lot of us feel that way. Yes, we're all very good at what we do, but we're all taken by the mission, really. And we talk to somebody about coming to work, you know, we spend almost the entire interview in what our COO calls their cultural fitness for the job, right? How they will operate in our environment, and that they'll love our environment like we do. And we're not as worried about their technical skills because they're on paper and they've done other jobs. And we also don't want to inject, you know, anybody rude into our system, even if they're an achiever, even if they're unbelievable. It's not the right place. And so we're filling the place with highly motivated, capable, and passionate people that have a heart. And it's very humbling to work around all of those people, all trained on the same mission at the same time. And I'm grounded. Another thing is, you know, 3 adult children, women, will keep daddy grounded pretty well. So I don't really have a lot of trouble with that.
That's the girl's responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, speaking on that, is there a specific story or incident that you've had happen with an employee or somebody that has impacted you personally?
Well, I do have personal impact at times because someone will come up to me and tell me about a child that they have who, you know, they may be on the spectrum, and they don't, you know, they're very unsure of what will happen for the rest of their life. The biggest fear voiced over and over again by parents is, what is going to happen as I age? Because every parent worries about that.
Of course.
Okay, but parents of people with disabilities really worry about that because of capability levels. And to be able to employ their child is one of the biggest blessings that they could possibly have, right? Imagine the grief of worry about what will happen when I'm gone gets to disappear. And so, I've been personally connected to a number of them. It's not what I seek to do. I'm more about being, professionally connected and making the organization achieve. But I don't shy away from any personal connection to the job, because really, we're serving here. It is a service job, and so I'm fine with that.
And so you are heavily involved in both civic and philanthropic boards. Why is community engagement so important to you?
Well, everybody has been influenced in different ways, right? But it just happens that my mother and father were all about charity, and really talked a lot about it in the home. And we grew up as a family that knew we would give back throughout our lives. And then just to cap it off, I spent 30 years at the Miami Herald with 3 or 4 unbelievable leaders. I got to be mentored by Dave Lawrence and Alberto Ibargüen and Joe Natoli. And these are people, first of all, that after being publisher in the newspaper industry, all went into nonprofit work. Why did they go into nonprofit work? Because that particular for-profit felt very much like a nonprofit, because we were serving the community.
It's the point of journalism.
Yeah. And beyond that, personally, they all understood what it meant to be able to contribute to your community in different ways. And there was no way, with parents like that and mentors like that, that I wasn't going to pass through my career giving back to the community. And did I know I would ultimately go into nonprofit work and make my professional life tied up with my desire to serve? I had no idea. But I did have an idea once I knew I was starting a second career, and thought a lot about what I might want to do. And I thought, well, my second career will not be as long as my first career. Maybe I should spend it on something I know I'll be really fulfilled by. And whatever money will work itself out, And sure enough, I was lucid enough to make the right decision when I moved on to the second career, because there's nothing that would have returned to me what this has returned to me personally.
Wow. I mean, going from journalism itself, I feel like, is a form of philanthropy, telling people stories, engaging with the community, being an advocate for people who don't have a voice.
Absolutely.
So to be able to transition that into a different sector, and again, be a voice for somebody who a lot of times feels like they don't have a voice, is just an amazing transition.
It's a big deal. It's a natural transition.
Yes.
A lot of times people say, well, what on earth does running a nonprofit have to do with running a newspaper? I say a lot more than you
Very
think, because of what you just said, which is an orientation towards something that does positive good in the community. The funny thing I tell people when I'm touring them around the building, and we're standing in the fabric cutting room, is I take a look at that roll of camo that's sitting on the spindle that's about ready to come out and get cut. So you know what that looks like to me? A roll of newsprint, right? Same exact thing. Raw material, cut into a product. Quality is extremely important. Timeliness is extremely important in order for you to have a product and be able to vend that product. I'm doing the exact same thing I was doing before, except it's with cloth instead of paper.
Wow.
It's pretty fascinating, the parallel.
That is pretty.
And if you think about leading through that, right? And metrics and doing your best work, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. We measure ourselves in some very similar ways that we did in the newspaper business as a product. And as a mission, we manage ourselves very much like a newsroom would. And we're about helping people. Those journalists are most juiced up when they know the outcome of a story is going to do some social good.
Yes. I haven't had that much history in journalism so far, but I feel like the stories that I am most fulfilled by are when they are having an impact.
Yep. It's a gift.
It is. It's a blessing too.
Yeah,
it's a blessing to be able to experience other people's experiences. It's a blessing to be able to experience emotion through other people.
Absolutely.
And so to conclude our discussion today, what is the legacy that you hope to leave behind?
Oh, you know, of course, in a literal way, I want to leave behind a nonprofit organization that is self-sufficient for many, many, many years to come. Obviously, I don't mean necessarily financially self-sufficient, because we will always be looking for the next donor that can help us advance the next project. You know, it's expensive to provide the kind of care and opportunity that we do, but it's also expensive to start new ventures and new businesses. But I want to leave an organization that is successful and growing. That's always been really, really important to me. But what is entering that view now after many years in this is, before I'm gone from doing what I'm doing, I want to influence the private sector to take a chance on people with disabilities. And I think what you'll find is the most dedicated people who are the most happy to have a job and less likely to turn over, and very focused on the success of what they do. I think that if all goes well, private industry will learn a lot more about the working disabled, and they'll be pleased by it and engage in it. And I know that's the one thing that I can leave that will take chunks out of this community issue instead of nice parts. It will take nice, really sizable chunks out of the group of people who would love to work but just don't have that opportunity. And I think private industry is going to become the key to that. I'm trying to speak on it more often when I can. I don't want to make it sound like I'm being critical of private industry. I spent 30 years in private industry. I understand that it may not be the very top goal, but along the way, we can make a lot more space for people who might have some challenges and might just surprise you in what they can deliver.
Yeah, and why not take a chance on people who deserve to have that voice and that advocacy?
Really all about offering up an opportunity where we might not have seen the viability of that opportunity before. And it really does what you say. You know, the work gives people a voice. It gives them a spot in the community that we all get to share in, but they are often excluded from.
Yes.
And that's the idea. That's the idea. And I think, honestly, I'm not saying to private industry, do something that can't possibly financially work. I'm telling you, look at Goodwill and its 6 businesses, and we find a way to cash flow every one of them. You can too. Just pay a little bit of attention, hire some of our graduates, and we will do a better job at providing you people with certificates now, going forward, where they're specifically prepared for your jobs. That's our commitment. And yeah, I want private industry to come along on the journey.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the impact that you have created is not only going to impact the disabled community here in Miami, but the community throughout South Florida and throughout the nation as well. These
topics are very hot across the country. You know, Goodwill is in all 50 states, and so we gather together and share all the time. So what one does is good for all.
Yes, of course.
You know, we have a tremendous opportunity because we've been really successful in a retail business, driving the funding for nonprofits. I heard a stat the other day that says there is a Goodwill store within 10 miles of 80% of America.
Wow.
So what can we do? What can we help with? Limitless.
Yeah, and nobody has an excuse then to not be donating and not be helping their local community. Nobody has
it's
an
right
excuse.
there. It's so easy. It's so clear what it's going towards.
Yes.
You know, one last thing I'll leave your listeners with. One of the best services out there that rate nonprofits is Charity Navigator.
Yes.
And it happens to give you a stat of how much of your total expenses are going to program expense. And if you look up Goodwill South Florida, you will find that we're a 95. That means 95% of our costs are going to program expense. Or conversely, only 5% is going to management or support services like HR, finance, or the other thing that it takes to run the business. There aren't many 95s in the nation. So if you're ever wondering whether the donation you're making of stuff is going to good, it's going to good.
It is. And I encourage anybody listening as we conclude this podcast, if you have the opportunity, like I said before, to take a tour, to engage with your local Goodwill services, take advantage of that, because truly everything that you donate, everything that you do, it has an impact, and it is just an incredible organization.
Bring
to
a group of
be a
people.
part of.
We're
Yes.
happy to have a group.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to have you back on again soon, just to catch up and explore some more of your accomplishments. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.